Yesterday we had learned a number of Gemaras that talked about tzedakah. The Gemara also compared tzedakah to gemilas chasodim. There's the concept of charity. There's also a concept of doing acts of kindness that aren't really included in the mitzvah of tzedakah. It's really a separate mitzvah called gemilas chasodim. The Gemara compared the two things and mentioned that gemilas chasodim is, in a certain sense, greater than tzedakah because there is the ability to do it in numerous extra opportunities for gemilas chasodim. It applies to rich people and to poor people. You could do chesed to a rich person. Tzedakah you could only fulfill if the person is poor. Gemilas chasodim you have whether it's with your money or with a other type of method of doing kindness. For example, you carry someone's load, you help them with their load up to their house. So that would be doing a chesed to someone. That would be gemilas chasodim, an act of kindness. But with charity, it really is a financial thing. You have to give money. Of course, it has to be done in a proper way, but with a smile and so on, make the person feel good. But the tzedakah part is really the money. Tzedakah is with money, and gemilas chasodim is whether with money or with your body. Now, how do you do gemilas chasodim with money? If you give someone a loan, then it would be with your money or with your possessions. You could do it with lending someone one of your tools or something that you have that they need. Now, tzedakah is for poor. Gemilas chasodim is whether the person is poor or rich. You could still do a chesed, give someone a ride, even if they're rich. You still get a mitzvah of chasodim. But tzedakah, you don't get a mitzvah. If you give a rich person $100, you haven't fulfilled tzedakah. But to give a rich person a ride, you fulfill the mitzvah of gemilas chasodim. And then it says tzedakah can only be fulfilled for those that are living. But gemilas chasodim, you could fulfill the mitzvah of gemilas chasodim, whether for the living or for those that have passed on, as we know the term chesed shalemes. It's a gemilas chasodim, a chesed shalemes, that a person does with those that have passed on. And that is a brisa that the Gemara brought. And then Rabbi Elazar talked about, we had a number of statements from Rabbi Elazar. We had, in fact, that was one brisa. Before it, we had a few statements of Rabbi Elazar, and then we have a statement afterwards. The statement of Rabbi Elazar was about the famous pasuk, one of the haftarahs, where it talks about asois mishpat, avas chesed, and tzneah aleches. It's right at the end of, I forget which haftarah it is, but it's at the end of one of the haftarahs where we read that pasuk, and it talks about tznius, it talks about doing mishpat, justice, and avas chesed, loving kindness. And what does that refer to? So he mentions, Rabbi Elazar says, it refers to din, asois mishpat, means zehadin. It's different ways of translating that, but it refers to justice, some type of doing things according to din, according to the letter, the way things should be, giving a just judgment, or acting appropriately with others could be included in that asois mishpat. And then avas chesed was milas chasodim. Hatznei aleches, we said, refers to other mitzvahs that apply, that are the term leches. Where do we find the word leches? By other mitzvahs, leches, going. So we say it mentioned that applied to levaya and chasana. Hitzos hameis and achnasas kala lechuppah. And the Gemara made a kavachayma that just like in those areas where a person, I guess, does tzedakah that sometimes the fund is the funding for such an event is done in a public way. So if that is supposed to be done hatsnei alechas, even though the collecting was done public in a public way, but nevertheless the mitzvah should be in a modest way, in a way that you don't go uh, publicizing that you are the one who paid for this chasana. You're the one that paid. So it shouldn't be. There should be a tznei alecha, so kavachimer for sure. Other mitzvahs that are normally not done publicly, that they don't fundraise in a public way for. So that should be done for sure with an element of tznius. And then the Gemara talked about doing tzedakahs greater than karbanos. And tzedakah, if you think about it, tzedakah is really for people. Karbanos is really for Hashem. So you always have that question of what's more important, bein adam lamakayim and bein adam lachaveroi. We always have the question. People are always looking down at others. They're so religious, but they don't care so much about acting like a mensch. And then you have the opposite, looking at other people. They don't serve Hashem at all, but they make sure to help others. But what about serving Hashem? So here Rabbi Elazar says, "Gadol ha'isa tzedakah yoser mikol hakarbanos." The greater is giving tzedakah more than all the sacrifices. Of course, obviously, bein adam lamakim and bein adam lachaveroi are both crucial to serving, to doing what Hashem wants, to fulfilling our mission in life. But it is interesting that Rabbi Elazar spells out, says tzedakah is greater than all the karbanos. He brings a pasuk, asoi tzedakah mishpat nivchar laHashem mizevach. It's greater to Hashem than a sacrifice.
By question.
Yeah.
There are a lot of tzedakah requests through GoFundMe pages. So the question I have is it better to give tzedakah and do it anonymously, or give your name, or what exactly is the best way to go?
Right. Good question. Because the Gemara before the Gemara mentioned about hatsnei alechas, about doing it in a more modest way, in a more secretive way, and a private way, and it sounds like that might be what our Gemara is emphasizing. On the other hand, there does seem to be a benefit on putting your name there, that first of all, people believe that you actually gave, and they will want to match you. In other words, it's like sometimes you get nervous. Is this a real fund? Are people really giving to this, or is it just people they just putting up some names and making it look official, making it look better? So when your name is there, it does make it look like definitely when your name is there, if it'll make others say, "Oh, I guess Ezra looked into this, and he knows the family, he knows them." So there's definitely a milah benefit in doing it with your name, because it might get others to give. So I would think that overrides this concept. In other words, this concept applies to situations where the people involved don't, they're embarrassed of the situation. But when something is put on a GoFundMe, they're already publicizing it themselves. You know what I mean? It's public knowledge, the situation. So if you have a neighbor that's poor and they're embarrassed to collect to have money, they're embarrassed about their situation. So your neighbor, you want to be private about, and you hand them, give them money and do it in private. But here it's a GoFundMe, I see it being more of a public knowledge in the first place. This is already publicly, and they've already put their situation out in the public to get help. So I don't know if there's any concept of hatsnei aleches, if especially if it's going to bring if the benefit of bringing more money in for them, which they need, override. I would think that that should override the hatsnei aleches part. But otherwise, if it's not benefiting anyone, and then it's just about being modest, yeah, then for sure, there's no need to do it publicly. You could just do it. You could do it anonymously. That would be more of a mitzvah because you're not showing off. It would be a more humble, more appropriate way to do mitzvahs. Okay, so that's my thought. Of course, you could ask a Rav more for halachic, verdict on that, but that would be my thought. Yes, David.
The first time I donated a sefer to the yeshiva that I was going to, so I said to the Rosh Yeshiva, should I put anonymous? He said, no, put your name. This way people will see it and they'll say, oh, David gave, I can also give.
Right. Yeah, definitely there's competition. In fact, most of the shuls, you see how it works on like Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, when you see other people giving, all of a sudden this, people who were quiet, all of a sudden they're screaming out numbers and, they want to match the other guy. If this doctor gave that, I'm a doctor also, I better match that. Oh, the lawyer, I'm an accountant. I better match that other guy. Oh, if he gave that. So it does create extra tzedakah, which benefits everyone. So
it's not a competition, which is negative. It's a encouragement, which is positive.
There's positive competition and negative competition. It's a positive competition. As it says, kinas chachim, kinas soifrim tarba chachma. The jealousy of scholars adds more knowledge. So it's like there's jealousy that's positive. There's competition that's positive. It's a jealousy sounds like a terrible thing, but it actually is. And the Gemara mentions jealousy with regard to scholars. It's a very good thing. It actually makes them wanna. The mediocrity is not. They're not going to be satisfied with winging it. They're going to want to, they see someone else is knowledgeable in this field, in this halacha, and these halachas, they're going to say, I also want to learn those halachas well. So it's marba chachma, tarba chachma. Okay, so the Gemara here then mentioned that another few statements of Rabbi Elazar. It brought this brisa that we just quoted about the what was it, brisa? Second. About the we actually there's a few statements of Rabbi Elazar, and then we quote this brisa. What's the other statement of Rabbi Elazar? So it's great as Gemilas Chasadim more than tzedakah, and he brings a pasuk that tzedakah is about planting seeds. Harvest, that's Gemilas Chasadim. And the term used is that when you plant, you don't know what's going to come out. It might not grow. It might get, even if it grows, it might get ruined by some winds or hail, but harvesting, then for sure there is what to eat. So what comes out is that chesed is much greater than tzedakah, and what the simple understanding seems to be is that tzedakah, you're sort of limited to was it a real mitzvah or wasn't it? Like you don't know 100%. Tzedakah is always a question. Of course, we like to trust everyone, and that's a good thing to be to believe people are honest and so on. But the thing is that tzedakah, you don't always know 100% all the situation that the person is in. and if it's going to really go to to benefit them in a positive way, and for their needs, for the needs that they need it. And chesed is more of a more comprehensive, more generic, I should say, that in general, you're doing a chesed. It's not that the person is poor; he doesn't have to fit a certain criteria. I did a chesed for the guy. I helped him out, and so that is it's like you much more chance of that it's accomplishing, that it's the person is fulfilling a mitzvah. It's getting rewarded. You're going to get rewarded for a mitzvah.
Well, question.
That's what it seems like from that would be the meaning. Yes, Ezra. Yeah.
Well, when you give tzedakah, I mean, when I give tzedakah, an individual comes, shows me a teudah, whatever it is, I have to assume that that what he's telling me is the truth. I can't go and investigate everything that leads the individual to come to my door and ask for a tzedakah. So when I give, Hashem will have to take care of the other part if the guy is not an honest individual. So that's not up to me. So and the individual himself, if he's honest, great, fantastic. If he's not, then he has to deal with Hashem, not with me. So I've done my part. I don't see a downside to whether or not tzedakah is whether it's good tzedakah or it's bad tzedakah or whatever it is.
Right. Good point. Good point. Our Gemara there seems to be a few statements that seem to emphasize that, like, if your tzedakah works out, it's a like we do sort of take that into consideration, the outcome. And where do we see that? Well, this statement does sound a little like that that greater is milas chasadim than tzedakah, because when you plant, you're not sure if it's going to grow. And so if you compare tzedakah to zriya, to planting, it's more of a question. If you compare gmilas chasadim to harvesting, it's more of a definite. So that sounds like we do take into consideration the outcome. Now, the other Gemara, few paragraphs further, it says that not everyone merits to be able, that their tzedakah is appropriate. Oyev tzedakah umishpat, chesed Hashem mala haaretz. That's a pasuk in Tehillim, and it says maybe you'll think whoever tries to do this fulfills it. Kol haba litbait koifetz. Whoever jumps to do tzedakah, he'll find the right people who deserve it. It says no, not necessarily. Ma'yakar chastecha elikim, that it's something very precious, that you have to run after. It's not so easy to find people who are fitting, and you have to sort of like pursue such people that are fitting to receive tzedakah. And if you pursue, fine, but if you're not pursuing it, you're not going to get it. And then it says maybe even someone who's a Yoreh Shamayim is not necessarily going to get the right people. So the Gemara brings a pasuk. It says Rabbi Elazar brings a pasuk. Tehillim Chesed Hashem Me'olam Ad Olam Al Yireyav, that someone who's a Yoreh Shamayim, he's going to find the right people, that he'll be the chesed that he does is complete. So it sounds like, on the one hand, what you're saying is true, that you did tzedakah, but on the other hand, there seems to be more of a reward if your tzedakah accomplishes and it goes to the right people. Like you did what you were supposed to, but it seems from our Gemara again, and this is a good question that you're asking, but I see Mordechai wants to tell us something. Is this about this question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, there's a joke about a collector rings somebody's bell and says, I lost everything in a fire. The Balabas says, do you have a Tues attesting to that? He says, oi, that was also lost in the fire.
So anyway, so yeah, so that it's a good question. Like what does this mean? Why is it, in other words, what it would seem like it shouldn't be dependent on the outcome. We did what we had to. Like why is that? What are we expected to do to make it like we can't go checking every single person out? Yeah, it's interesting, but it seems like there is the outcome as well. Like when it comes to Gemilas Chasadim, it's not just what you do, but there's also the outcome is also part of the equation. I know there's a talk about Hachnosas Orchim. Is it but with Avram Avinu, did he get the mitzvah of Hachnosas Orchim? He thought they were real people, and turns out that they were really angels. So it wasn't really a mitzvah. There's no mitzvah to feed angels who aren't really eating anything.
Right, it just says orchim. It doesn't say what kind of orchim.
Yeah, but if they're not humans, it's not hachnasas orchim. It's not a mitzvah of hachnasas orchim. You don't fulfill the mitzvah. If you have, I don't know, ducks coming up to your house.
Ducks are different. Malachim is on a level higher, I would think, spiritually. So I would
there's no eating. They don't eat.
People and up.
Yeah, I don't know if they're called urchim. I mean, they're not real. They're not humans. But
I understand. I know all this.
Right. So then the famous question is, if there really is not hachnasas archim for angels, so the question is, there's a whole understanding from the Parshas Vayera, where that story takes place, right in the beginning of Vayera. The understanding is that Avram Avinu showed us that greater is Achnasas Orchim more than Hakbalas B'nei Hashchina. You see that Hashem was talking to Avram, he was visiting Avram, and all of a sudden these guests came. And so Hashem is in the middle of talking to Avram. You would think Avram is going to continue his conversation with Hashem and forget about the guests, and that's not what happened. Avram tells Hashem, wait a moment, let me deal with the guests. And you see, greater is Achnasas Orchim more than Hakbalas Pnei Hashchina. The question is, but it wasn't Achnasas Orchim. It really is, you don't really see that. Because he didn't really have guests. They weren't real guests. They were not human. So maybe it's not a proof that Achnasas Orchim is greater than Hakbalas B'nei Hashchina. I mean, I guess you see it a little because he thought that they were guests, so you see that was the appropriate thing, maybe because he believed they were humans. So therefore, I guess you could see maybe that the halacha would be if they're humans. But the fact is that they weren't real people. Anyway, bottom line is that I'd have to look it up. But I'm sorry. What are you saying?
Yeah. So here's the situation. So if they weren't real people, then why does he tell them, please wash your feet?
No, he thinks that they are. Okay, but the question is, can you still learn from that? Can you learn from that Hachnasas Orchim is greater when in truth it really was not Hachnasas Orchim? Or do we say, well, Hachnasas Orchim is what you think is about you? Is Hachnasas Orchim about the recipient or about the giver? So here also it's tzedakah. Is it about the giver or is it about the recipient? If it's about giving, so you gave, you had all reason to assume that this guy is poor. So you did your mitzvah of tzedakah. If it's all about the recipient receiving, so if his money goes, if the money goes to good use, then great. Then you did your mitzvah. If the money doesn't, not really as eligible as he claims to be, so then maybe your mitzvah is not totally fulfilled. Again, it's the question of, is it about the giver or about the recipient? And I know they discuss it when it comes to Hachnasas Orchim because of this on the parsha of Vayera. It's discussed over there, and I think there's a sicha from the Lubavitcher Rebbe about it also, about Bikar Cholim, and based on the language of the Rambam, is it more about the recipient or about the giver? But anyway, so this seems to be connected to that idea as well. Is it about the giver or the recipient? It sounds, again, there probably are commentaries that talk more about this, these two statements of Rabbi Elazar, but it does give the implication like it's not easy to do tzedakah, and the real tzedakah is when the person really uses it and it gets used for good purposes. The people are really eligible, fully eligible.
Hey, Siri, open authenticator.
We'll have to look into this more. I see they bring down here a Gemara in Baba Basra where it mentions that if a person pursues tzedakah, Hashem, in other words, you try hard to give tzedakah properly, Hashem will give you anoshim mehuganim, people who are eligible, who are proper people that are deserving, which is they're bringing this Gemara on the bottom over here to bring the same idea of what Rabbi Elazar is saying here in Sukkah, a similar concept over there, that you have to pursue it, that you don't always, tzedakah is not as easy as it sounds. That's what the Gemara, it seems from this Gemara. So
hey, Siri,
we'll have to look more into
account authenticator.
Like a lie test, should. But anyway, you have to be careful because it becomes very you could hurt people's feelings if you don't, if you, depending on how you give the tzedakah, like. You know what I mean? Like, you can't tell the guy, listen, I'm giving you $1. I don't trust you, but I'm giving you $1, So you didn't really get the mitzvah, when you say things like that. I'll give you $1 because I really don't know you. But if you just, you give the dollar with a smile, I said, if they don't want to take it, that's up to them. But you gave a quarter, people used to joke around that, it's good we have pushkas because now at least you have a pushka, you at least can give coins. A lot of the people, they don't take if it's just coins. They say, no, sorry, it's okay. So the benefit of having pushkas is that you can at least get away tzedakah with giving a coin.
And now
anyway,
they all have machines now.
Yeah, they take your credit card. Yeah. I must say it's not easy. I went to the Kaisel last week. It was really complicated. You give one person, all of a sudden they're all lining up there. You're the rich American, they're all coming to you. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem.
But you have to sort of like prepare yourself, either get coins before or decide how much you're giving. Otherwise, it's
one or the other. Either that or you're going to walk away and know the next time you have to do. Either way, you're going to learn from the experience.
No, but I'm saying you don't want to get like turned off. Like someone tells me, I can't go to shul. Someone told me, when all of the shluchim come to town, in the Kinas HaShluchim, he says, I can't daven in 770 anymore. They're all coming to me for money. I go to some other shul. So it's like you have to sort of like prepare.
My father had an answer for that. Make velen. You can want. Make velen. Make velen. Or can spregen. You can ask. You can ask anything you want. He gave what he gave, and that's it.
I think it's important to like prepare yourself in advance, brace yourself that I'm giving $1 to every person and that's it. or I'm, a shekel to every person, or otherwise you like get angry afterwards. Like they contain, like sort of like if you plan on it, you sort of otherwise it's like you're sort of like annoyed, and it's not good to be annoyed with a mitzvah, but like they just annoy you.
You don't want to get overwhelmed either way.
Overwhelmed and annoyed with a mitzvah. So if you prepare yourself in advance, listen, I'm taking my 20 shekels with me. Each person is getting a shekel. I'm probably going to be about 20 people. That's it. I'm not surprised. I'm not annoyed. Otherwise, it's like a bad feeling to feel annoyed. But at the same time, I mean, what do they expect from you? You can't even daven. It's like there's also a famous question of if you're involved in oisek b'mitzvah is pater min mitzvah. So you really when you're involved in one mitzvah, you're really allowed to be doing another mitzvah. You're supposed to be fully involved. So if you're davening and they're coming to you, there is a concept that maybe you're not even supposed to be giving tzedakah while you're davening. If you're concentrating on davening, there is such a concept. So some people like to put coins, where they're davening, and whoever comes can just take. Like I'm davening, I'm not interrupting my davening for another mitzvah because I'm supposed to be fully involved in my davening. But so there is such an idea. I don't know if it's accepted in halacha, like to what extent we say that oisik b'mitzvah, that you're involved in one mitzvah, you should be concentrating in that mitzvah. So it deserves to be looked into. I'd like to ask a paisik about that, if that like to what extent that applies. Like, should you really not be giving tzedakah during davening? What really is annoying is if you're late and you're trying to catch up, and then the guy comes to you and you're giving tzedakah, but I'm trying to catch up. Come to me, afterwards. But that's anyway. So this is these are issues that come up, and it's part of the challenges of being from going to shul.
Remember, Rabbi, you've been to our shul. There's a sign that we put outside the door that basically asks the shluchim not to come in during the davening.
Right. Right. So I'm not sure who initiated that sign. Was that during the time of Rabbi Learfield, or is that something that's new?
That sign was there long before I came.
So the question is halachically if it's really I mean, there is a concept of giving tzedakah before davening, which is the Nusach Ari says you're supposed to say, I am accepting on myself to do Avas Yisrael, have to l'recha kamaycha, and then it's customary to give like a coin before davening. Then there's a minhag also, like ve'oisher ve'akavod milfanecha, when you say that the wealth is all yours, Hashem, right before Oz Yasher and Vayivarach David. So there is a minhag, it seems, to give tzedakah then. So that minhag seems to contradict what I'm saying, that there is an idea of not jumping to another mitzvah when you're doing one mitzvah. So if you're in the middle of davening, should you really be giving? But maybe it goes hand in hand. I guess tzedakah, davening to Hashem and giving tzedakah maybe are not contradictory. Again, it deserves to be looked into. It's something maybe I should see if there's anything on the internet about, or discussion about tzedakah and davening, and if it's oisek b'mitzvah, if there's a problem of doing another mitzvah at the same time. I think Jeffrey, you wanted to say something. Is that right?
Two items. Yes. Yes. The first one is that I learned that people come to weddings also. If you go to New York City, at least, and I used to prepare, but when I went to a wedding, to bring an envelope of dollar bills. But I had to experience it first before. Right. The other thing is, and there are a lot of shuls that have the custom of auctioning off for the aliyahs, and they delay the Torah reading for doing that.
Right.
So it's not necessarily tefillah that they delayed, or interrupt.
So I don't know if I see that as much of a problem. Maybe it is, but I see that as that's part of that. In other words, they're stopping the davening. They're doing that mitzvah now, and then they'll, in other words, it's not like both mitzvahs are being done simultaneously.
Correct.
Stopping the davening. We're going to do Kriyas Torah later. Maybe it is an issue. I don't know. Yeah, that's what you're saying. Like, would that also be an issue? You're wondering because. Should you be pushing off davening for it? The famous understanding is that you wouldn't be able to have davening if you don't have this fundraiser. So it's sort of like a means to be able to keep the show running. But anyway, yeah, it deserves to be looked into as well.
But it is orderly. It's very orderly. I mean, they finished chakras first.
Right.
Yeah. So there's that kind of plan involved.
Right. Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry, Ezra. What?
Yeah, the Kaddish separates between Shachrit and the Torah reading.
Right.
So
true.
Consider to be, the end of that
segment.
particular.
Yeah. True.
I used to have an issue with auctioning off the aliyahs because only the rich people would get an aliyah. Nobody else would be able to get an aliyah ever.
Yeah, there is such an issue. I didn't mind it so much the rich people. What I minded is, what about the bacharim who are bar mitzvahed? They are the ones we want to make them feel comfortable in shul. They never get anything, So to me, that was like more of a turnoff. I don't mind if the rich people get the aliyahs, but at least let the bacharim who became bar mitzvahed and 14 and 15 and 16, let them feel part of shul. Otherwise, they never get aliyahs in some of these shuls. Why? Because they're not, even if they're not rich, even if the balabatim get aliyahs, because they're going to give something. They'll give people who aren't rich. They give something. These bachram are not giving much. So then a lot of shuls, they sort of like push them to the side, and they give them a hagba if they're lucky, or a glila, if they're lucky. But they never give them anything. What a turnoff. Especially these are vulnerable kids that are in an age of chinuch, age where there's all different challenges. They're not settled yet. They're deciding on which high school, which college, and things. These are the most important. Anyway, yes, Jeffrey.
I just add one other thing. That is, I always say to people, I like small schools. We came to Boston, and when we bought our house, we were invited by a neighbor to come to a smaller shul. And there were very few children in the shul. They were mainly seniors.
Uh-huh.
And the rabbi made sure to pay attention. He followed every child. He and his wife would visit every child. And when they went from high school, if they went to Israel, they would visit them on every trip to make sure that they were involved. And they were signed, like, this one will do this, and this one will do this. And the result was they all learned how to daven, and they all learned how to have aliyahs and to function like a gabbai. And 7 guys became really studious, and you want to say maybe rabbis. Wow. Okay, in a small shul. I said that doesn't just happen by accident, because people made relationships with them in a small shul. And also the balabatim, there would be a man who's 50 who becomes a friend of a fellow who's 15, and it changed their lives.
Wow.
because they needed something more than just parents sometimes. But in a small shul, you can do that.
Right. Very nice. Very nice. Okay. So anyway, getting back to our Gemara here, 49b. So the Gemara also mentions Rabbi Elazar. Another statement. Ein tzedakah mishtalemes ela lefi chesed sheba. The reward of tzedakah depends on your tircha, your involvement, your burden, how much you put into it. How much you had to bend over backwards. As it says, Ziru lachem letzdaka v'kitzru lefi chesed, It says you plant the tzedakah, but then you harvest the reward according to the chesed, according to the amount of chesed involved, according to the amount of work that was involved. And again, it's expounding on this pasuk, the same pasuk in Hosea, which mentions both tzedakah and chesed, and we're trying to like figure out what is the meaning of this about planting like tzedakah and harvesting chesed. So this is the different expounding the gemaras that are the understandings about this poetic verse. And so according to this understanding, it's the chesed part is about the amount of burden you put into it, the chesed that was involved, all of your work that you were involved in giving that tzedakah. That's what you harvest. That's the reward. Okay, and then the Gemara brings that brisa that we said that there's a difference between tzedakah and gemilas chasadim, all the differences. And the famous question on that brisa is, if you give a poor person a sandwich, did you fulfill the mitzvah of gemilos chasadim or of tzedakah? Which mitzvah did you fulfill? The guy is hungry. You gave him a sandwich. Did you get tzedakah, or did you get gemilas chasadim, or did you get both? The Sfas Emes wants to prove from this brisa. It says clearly tzedakah is a money mitzvah. Gemilas chasadim is with memainai or with gufai, but gemilas chasadim is memainai. It's your money. If you gave him something else, he wants to say it's well, or maybe if it's maybe you could fulfill it with giving a sandwich, because it's also maybe your possessions. But what about if you did something else for this poor person? You you helped him in a way that okay, giving him, I guess, could also be considered tzedakah, giving him a sandwich. But let's say you helped this poor person out, begufay, he didn't have anyone to mow his lawn. He didn't have any money. You went, you did that for him. So did you get gemilas chasadim or did you get tzedakah? Did you you gave him, his oven is broken, you let him cook in your oven. So that's not, I don't know if you would call that memainai. Call that tzedakah. Would you call that tzedakah? Your possession? Well, maybe it is tzedakah.
It's with your possessions. Why not? Any kind of possession you give, maybe you're giving him something.
The question, I guess, would
one
be,
is you're giving him something, and the other one is you're doing something.
Doing something. So the question would be, if you did something for someone, begufay, would you get tzedakah out of it? It sounds like you wouldn't. It sounds like that's not part of tzedakah. Tzedakah is when you give him something, or give him with your money, your possessions.
That's what I would think. But who says gemilas chasadim is less? It's probably more. Because it's taking your kayach.
Yeah. That's what our whole Gemara is saying. It's greater. But the question is, did you get a mitzvah of tzedakah? It sounds like you don't. He also gives an example. Let's say someone is very poor and they pass away. So person buried them for free. A funeral home buried them, whatever. He was buried for free. So would that organization or that person who buried him for free, would they get the mitzvah of tzedakah? He says, no, that's not. Tzedakah is nasan titan loy. You got to hand him something. If you're you gave him a free grave, or you even did the physical act of burying, he wants to say that's not handing him something. That's not, he's not alive. You didn't get tzedakah. You got gemilas chasadim, but it's not nasan titain. Nasan titain is handing him something. So let's say you the person dug the grave.
At the end, you put the marker. You put the marker on the caver. Then you gave him something. But I don't know if you can do tzedakah to a mace.
To a mace, the Gemara says you can't. So
okay, so his question.
There's no tzedakah. It's it has to be done in a sina, nasan titan light to give him. He's not alive. You know, it has to be. Anyway, bottom line is the Brisa says differentiates between these mitzvahs of tzedakah and gemilas chasadim. It's gemilas chasadim is an interesting mitzvah. Like, let's say someone is wealthy and they want to ride somewhere. You're not really going there. They could pay for an Uber. They have money. Are you really full? How much of a gemilas chasadim are you getting by giving them this ride when there are other alternative options? You know, I guess the gemilas chasadim deserves to be clarified to what extent. Is it always a mitzvah of gemilas chasadim, even though
God will measure?
No, but I'm saying, like, the person is wealthy. They don't necessarily need this favor. You're going out of your way. Is that considered a mitzvah? Are you supposed to be doing that? Is that an extra mitzvah? Are you getting an extra mitzvah for that? Or is it not really?
I'd say yes. Anything you're doing out of your way. Let me ask you this. Does Hashem want us to go a little out of our way for the good? That's all Hashem wants. Just head that way and I'll take you the rest of the way. All Hashem wants from us is from our gut, one way or the other.
Again, you're looking at it as your mitzvah and you're going out of your way. That's great. But I'm wondering, to what extent does the mitzvah apply and where does it end if the person really doesn't need your mitzvah? You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't really need it. Like, there's an Uber a minute away, you know, like, to what extent is there a limit? Are you always fulfilling that mitzvah of gemilas chasad? You do construction, so you build someone's house for free. I mean, I don't know if you got a mitzvah there. You know what I mean? Is that a real mitzvah? The guy's wealthy. He wants to build a house. He could pay the other guy. Are you getting a gemilas chasad because you built his house and you didn't charge him? Or you fixed his car?
Not much.
I don't know. You know, like, weird. It must end somewhere. Right. There must be an end. There must be a limit. In other words, it's tzedakah. Gemilas chasad is bein aniyim bein lashirim. So it would seem to me that if it's something that's not something that people charge for, then you get gemilas chasadim. Gemilas chasadim, you know, you don't charge someone. You're you know, let's say you're driving and the guy's walking and and he needs a ride. Shkoyach, okay, there on anyway in my car. I'm going there. It's an extra minute. Fine. That's something no one charges for. But building a house is something that you charge. That's normally charged. That's something that's normally done with, that you pay for. I don't know.
Taxi rides. You'll always have a price somewhere.
Taxi rides, fine, I understand, but you also give people rides and you can't charge them when you're not a taxi driver, but you don't build houses for people,
But if you weren't there, he would have to then do something. So that's the question. If you're doing him a favor or not, what would he be doing?
Man, maybe he would walk. So then you're giving him a ride.
Maybe healthier for him. You should get punished because you're taking away his exercise. You can't do that.
Right. I hear.
I mean, you want to speculate as a game, yes, you can speculate, but don't do it too seriously. If you want to go through the inyonim, you want to go, what are the factors? Yes, then you can go through, a drush in your head. But otherwise, that's how I do it.
No, people always have this issue with relatives and friends, and where do you draw the line? When do you charge and when don't you charge? It is a question. So the Gemara here says gemilas chasadim bein la'aniyim bein la'ashirim. That it sounds like you do get the mitzvah, but there might be, maybe there is a limit to how far that goes. Anyway, it deserves to be looked into.
I am so far away from that limit. I'm not worried about it.
Uh-huh. I don't know, Isaac. You do a lot of titles in legal matters. I wouldn't. You did 10. How many years did you do with Aleph?
I know it was
You did 10
fine.
years.
Gemilas Chasadim, some
That's different than
tzedakah,
those
a
Hasidim,
lot
man.
of Gemilas Chasadim. That's why I sit back and I'm somewhat comforted these days that at least I know I did something worthwhile. I don't envy the people who have to look back
Right.
and say, what did I do all this for?
Yeah.
Unless you did something with the money, that's the question. What are you doing all this for?
Yeah. Okay. So then the next Gemara talked about what we mentioned earlier about that Yarei Shemayim people, they will merit that Hashem will arrange for them to fulfill tzedakah, but a regular person, not necessarily are they getting the automatically the tzedakah when they want to, are they fulfilling the mitzvah of tzedakah automatically? It's not kol haba likba, it's kaifetz. Anyone who comes to jump is able to jump. You don't always get that. Yerei Shamayim does, but the person who fears Hashem. And then came the next Gemara about if a person has a chayin, a special grace. So for sure there are Yerei Shamayim. And again, it's this pasuk about Chesed Hashem me'olam. It's a pasuk that mentions Chesed, but we're understanding it to mean chayin. That's it, because chayin and chesed sometimes mean the same thing. Chesed Hashem me'olam al yareyav. There's a chayin, there's a special grace on those that fear Hashem. And then comes the next statement of Teiras Chesed, a pasuk in Mishlei, which is a part of the Eishes Chayil. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and Teiras Chesed is al l'shoina. The Torah of Chesed is on her tongue. It's interesting because it's talking about a woman, and the understanding of the Gemara is Teres Chesed al L'Shayna. She has Torah Lishma. And normally we talk about women. The mitzvah of Torah for a woman is really to know what to do. It's limud al manas lasa. It's like they don't have really a mitzvah of limud al Torah for its own sake. It's the Torah of a woman is more to know what to do, and that's called Teras. So the term the Gemara uses is Teras Chesed. Now, if it's just a mushal of Eishes Chayil, and then you could say, okay, it's really talking about everyone, not talking about women. It's a mushal. But if it's talking about a woman, then the question would be, would that really be called Torah Lishma, because she's learning in order to know what to do, and that's called Teras Chesed. It's Torah Lishma. It's for the sake of knowing what to do. Now, of course, it's not a negative type of Lishma, which would be for honor or to be to be able to argue with people and things like that. Those are more negative Lishmas, different levels of negative, of Shalei Lishmas. But here, if this means a woman, and her mitzvah of Torah is not a mitzvah of learning Torah for its own sake, it's really a mitzvah to know what to do for her halachas, the halachas that she needs to know, the laws of Yichud, the laws of Chala, the laws of Nida, the laws of Tefillah, the laws, things that are applicable for women, and halachas Haner, Shabbos, and kashrus. And of course, there's a nice amount of halachas that are applicable. But so that would be called, according to that, that would be called Torah Lishma. It's called Teras Chesed. And I guess because Chesed means you're doing like a Chesed, it's a Chesed for Hashem. Like it's a type of Chesed. It's a Torah that's mixed with Chesed. It's you're not thinking about yourself. You're thinking about the Eibishter. It's because you want to serve Hashem properly. It's called Teras Chesed. So that's one understanding of that. It's called Torah Lishma. It's called Teras Chesed. Then the other understanding was Torah Lelamed is called Chesed. So it's the Torah that you learn in order to teach, or the Torah that you teach, you're doing Chesed with others. So that's called Teras Chesed, because it's a Torah. It's about teaching others, and it's not about yourself. It's about learning with others, and that's really that concludes the previous Gemara. We only have 2 minutes, so let's try to go a little further in our Gemara. So to turn the page.
Unless it's your son.
Uh-huh.
Because then you have a mitzvah.
Right, right. So maybe you can't be, that wouldn't be called chesed because you're fulfilling, you're really doing your obligation. That's not exactly the term chesed would probably be for others that you're not exactly obligated specifically to teach them.
See, so the people who swap tuitions are not just krima. They get a chesed.
Uh-huh. Okay, so the Gemara, we're gonna try and do a few minutes of this Gemara. We're on the bottom of page 49A, 49B, excuse me, 49B, bottom two lines over there. The Gemara, the Mishnah had mentioned that they would pour the water libation and they would fill the water. And on Friday they had a problem. On Shabbos there was a problem because you couldn't fill it on Shabbos, so they would have to fill it on Friday, and they would do it similar to the way they did it during the week. Except that they would do it on Friday instead of doing it on Shabbos. They would do it on Friday, so they didn't have to carry. So the Gemara says, why did they do that? Let them bring. Why did they bring? They would fill the water in a golden pail that wasn't sanctified. Why did they do that? The Gemara asks. In an unsanctified vessel, let them use a sanctified vessel. Let them use a sanctified vessel. And the understanding is that there would be a way of getting around the problem of lina. Normally, if you put water in a sanctified vessel, once it stays overnight, it's going to have a problem of lina, that it's old. Stayed overnight. You can't use it anymore for the mitzvah. But here, the Gemara is thinking that there are ways around that problem. Like, for example, if you put extra water, so it's not the right amount, so then it's not fit for the mizbeach. The mizbeach, you're supposed to have 3 lugan, according to one opinion, according to the rabbis. So if you do more than that, it won't be a problem of lina. Also, if you don't have in mind that it should sanctify the water, it would be another way around it. So the Gemara says, Amar Zeiri, the Zeiri says, no. Obviously, our Tana doesn't agree with these loopholes, with these ways around it. Our Tana, our author of our Mishnah, he holds, ain't Shir Lamayim. There's no measurement for water, meaning there's unlimited. You could give more than the 3 lugin. And therefore, whatever you fill into this pail is going to be sanctified, because it's not that you have to give 3 lugin and you're not allowed to give more than that. No, you could even pour more libation. 3 lugin is the amount you're supposed to give. But if you give more, if you pour more, it's also fine. Therefore, if you put more than 3 lugin, it would be sanctified, and even if it's more than that amount. And also, what about if you didn't have in mind the klisharis mekachin shalei midas? Klisharis will sanctify the water. This is a holy vessel, and it'll sanctify the water, even if it's shalei midas, even if you don't have in mind for it to sanctify the water. It will kick in. The sanctification will kick in even without your intention. The Maisi, now comes page 50a, 50b. Maisi bim kudeshes if silu lehu belina, and if you bring the water in a mikudeshes, in a vessel that was sanctified, what's going to happen? If silu lehu belina, it's going to become a puzzle invalid when it stays overnight, because even though you didn't have in mind that it should be sanctified, it's going to automatically sanctify it. And even though you put more water than you need, it's still going to be sanctified, because according to halacha, you could pour libations more than 3 lugin. And then Amar Chizkiah says, Klisharis ein mekachin ela midas, that Klisharis only sanctifies midas if you have intention. And therefore, if you didn't have intention that it should sanctify, it won't actually kick in the holiness. And therefore, there would be an avenue to take if you wanted to use a sanctified vessel, except that there's a gzeira midrabanan. There is a gzeira here, and that's why we don't use a sanctified vessel. Meaning, according to halacha, according to the letter of the law, biblically, you would be allowed to take a sanctified vessel and pour the water into this sanctified vessel from the shilayach, from the well, from the spring, and then do it on Friday, and it won't be possible of lina because you don't have in mind for it to sanctify the water yet. It'll only sanctify it the next day. And that night, the Friday night, it's not going to sanctify the water won't be sanctified Friday night. And therefore, it won't be invalid with lina, with staying overnight. Nevertheless, there is going to be a problem midrabanan rabbinically because it's called the gzeira. People are going to think that maybe you did have in mind that it should sanctify the water, and still you're using that same water to pour for a water libation. Obviously, it must be that water libations have no problem if the water stays overnight. And that's going to be a halacha that people are going to think. And that's wrong. And people are going to get the wrong impression. They're going to think that the halacha is that libations don't have no problem of lina. And therefore, we don't want people to make that mistake. And therefore, we take a utensil, a pail that's unsanctified. And therefore, you don't have this problem. And Amar Reb Yanai, Reb Zera, Reb Yanai says, and questionable if it's in the name of Reb Zera, but because Reb Zera was really much after him. But Reb Yanai says, you could even say that there is a measure for water. So there is a measure for water, 3 lugin. And if you gave more than that, it shouldn't be sanctified. And therefore, you would have that way around this problem of lina because you put more than 3 lugin. Or and you have another option, and that is that you don't have intention, because klisharis is only sanctifies the water if you have in mind for it to sanctify the water. If you don't have in mind for it to sanctify the water won't be sanctified. And if so, you would have an alternative method of getting around this problem of the water being sanctified with the holiness, and therefore it'll become puzzle invalid with lina staying overnight. But there will be a decree that there's a gzeira, and therefore you have to use unsanctified vessel. What's the decree? We're afraid that people will say, Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglaim, you filled this vessel for the purpose of Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglaim, to use for sanctifying the hands and the feet of the Kayanim. And if you did that, then people are going to think that that such a vessel will be they'll think that Kiddush Yadayim, that there's, for that, it'll be holy, and it'll become puzzle with lina, and nevertheless, it won't be a problem for Nesachim. They'll think that Nesachim, that libations, don't have a problem with lina. So in other words, you poured it for the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, and there's no limit. So it all became sanctified. There's no limit, because you could use as much water as you want to sanctify the hands and the feet of the Kayin, of the Kayin Gadol. And and it was intentional. And nevertheless, you're using it now for the libation. And the thing is that people will think that that there's no issue of lina, of the fact that it was overnight for the libation, and that would be wrong, a mistake. People are going to make that mistake, and therefore you have to use unsanctified vessel. You can't use a sanctified vessel. Okay, we're going to stop here.